This is HSC Option 3, Sports Medicine. The key idea is how is injury rehabilitation managed, and the actual dot point is return to play, and this is focusing on what are the different procedures that should be put in place to determine if the athlete is ready to return to the playing field after injury. The right hand side of the syllabus is massive for this dot point. There's two parts to it. It wants you to have an understanding of different physical tests that could be used to determine if an athlete is ready to return to the field of play. Now the second part of this is the different policies and procedures that different sporting codes and organisations have in place to determine if the athletes that play in their sport are able to get back onto the field. And I was specifically having a look at this whole idea of concussion, which is causing so much controversy, particularly in rugby league at the moment.
I got a medical report last week sometime, and I suppose going through it with my wife, the deciding factor was if I came back too early and copped another knock, I'm at high risk of causing long-term damage. And now I'm turning 30 soon, and it's a risk I'm not willing to take.
Was there a part of you tempted to just give it that 6 months, go back for the testing?
Yeah, there was, but look, I've been having a lot of headaches since round 3, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my wife. I tried hiding them.
Now I think what was interesting from that interview was what was said by Liam Fulton in the last few seconds of that interview, when he said that he was hiding the concussion symptoms from everyone, including his wife. So how was it that Liam Fulton was able to do that? Is it because the NRL didn't have any specific concussion policies and guidelines in place? And again, I'll have a look at some of those issues throughout this video. Often the problem with athletes returning to play after a long-term injury is the conflict of interest that's going on, because you've got different parties wanting different things. You've got the athlete who's worried about his long-term future. He often gets his pay from being on the field, so he's obviously got an interest of wanting to stay on the playing field. You've got the coach if it's particularly a star player who certainly wants them on the field, and then you've got the medical staff who are bound by the medical practices to do the right thing by the athlete. So they might be saying one thing in the example of Liam Fulton there, saying you should be retiring, and then you've got the athlete and coach who might have some other motives. Now the first dash point we have here is indicators of readiness for return to play, and we're looking at this idea of the athlete being pain-free. Now at professional elite level, what's the actual reality of professional players playing pain-free? As you can see from this headline here, the England football captain Steven Gerrard has regularly pain-killing jabs so he can be part of the team. So the question to be asked is how many footballers are actually playing pain-free every week? I would say at elite level, particularly for contact sports, it's not many. So anyway, we'll go through it anyway. The indicator of being pain-free is this: the player can be put through a series of tests to determine if they are relatively pain-free. Returning from a sore shoulder, the athlete could be required to perform shoulder press exercises in the gym or undergo a series of skill tests involving the shoulder, e.g. tackling practice. Degree of mobility is another sign or an indicator of return to play. A physio or team doctor should be able to move the injured area through a full range of motion without any sign or obvious hint of discomfort. So the student learn to on the right hand side addresses this particular dash point of indicators of return to play, because it says research and evaluate skill and other physical tests that could be used to indicate readiness to return to play. I've got 3 different examples here: for a netball ankle injury, for a football hamstring injury, and for a rugby league or an AFL shoulder injury. So here's the 3 examples. You got netball ankle injury, your football hamstring, and your rugby league shoulder. So for the netball ankle injury, the actual fitness test you could use could be the agility test. That's where the player is required to dodge and weave through a series of markers, and they are timed, just like this example here. They could also be required to put through a skills test. This would be a passing drill requiring sudden stopping and changing of direction, having to catch and then pass the netball quickly. The football hamstring injury, the fitness test could be a 40-metre sprint test. That's where they go flat out for 40 metres and they are timed. Ideally, you could be able to compare their time with previous fitness tests before the injury happened. A skills test for this would be a long passing drill where the player is forced to kick the ball with power over a direction of probably 30 metres or more. And finally, a return to play for the rugby league or / AFL shoulder injury. The fitness test could be a repetition max shoulder press in the gym. This is where they attempt to see how much they can lift on one repetition on the shoulder press. Again, ideally you'd be comparing their results to previous fitness tests that they have done prior to the injury. And finally, for their skills test, it could be tackling practice on tackle bags like this clip.
Good. Get a good shoulder strike, yeah? Remember, strike. Don't be in a rush to get outside. Stay inside. Between their feet.
The next dash point is monitoring progress, pre-test and post-test. This dash point is linked to what I was just talking about in putting the player through a series of fitness tests specific to their sport. So for example, the netballer who has an injured ankle should be probably required to perform some sort of agility test to check that the ankle has fully recovered. Ideally, the player would have performed the same fitness test prior to the injury so that results can be compared. As an example, the player may have recorded a pre-season agility test result of 14.5 seconds. The post-injury agility test result could have been 16.5 seconds, a 2 second slower time. This could indicate that perhaps the player does not have full confidence in the ankle has healed properly, and the player needs to spend further time in treatment and on the sidelines. The next dash point is psychological readiness. Many players returning after a long-term injury, such as an ACL knee injury, where they can be out for up to 12 months, can understandably be lacking in confidence that the knee has not fully recovered after the operation. Some measures that could be put in place to help give the athlete greater confidence would be taping the knee, putting the player through some simulated game time in training, or even playing the game in lower grades before they make their return to first grade. Also, in some instances, there is outside influences wanting the player to return to the field before the injury has fully recovered. The coach, the player, and importantly the medical staff should agree that the player is ready to return. This will give the player added confidence. Currently, the Australian Test captain Michael Clark has some pretty serious hamstring concerns that is potentially threatening his career. With a big Test series coming up in the summer, there are outside influence that would be wanting Michael Clark to return quickly, such as Cricket Australia, who see him as a valuable marketing commodity, and also the Australian coach Darren Lehmann, who wants his best player on the field. In this example, it's really important that Michael Clark, Cricket Australia, and the coach and the medical staff all agree of when Michael Clark should return to the field. In this instance, that the overall player's welfare, medical welfare, should be the #1 priority and not influences such as wanting the team to win. So if the player's welfare is put at the forefront, he is likely to have more confidence in his psychological readiness. I'm going to leave this video at psychological readiness. I'm going to address the last 3 dash points because of how much content is in them in a separate video. You can find that at the website www.coachpdhpe.com.